A man devastated by the loss of his wife tries to rebuild his family alongside a new partner, but what once seemed like balance soon turns into silence, fear, and signs of something dark happening within the mansion's walls. Disguised as a plumber, he witnesses hidden horrors and discovers courage where he least expected. And at the right moment, a truth engraved will echo so loudly that not even the stepmother's screams will be able to silence it. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching us from. We continue. The autumn sun streamed through the wide windows of the mansion in Kensington, one of London's most exclusive neighbourhoods. Robert Aldridge watched his two children playing in the garden with eyes that mixed love and melancholy. At 45, this property developer had built an empire many envied, but fortune had not filled the void left by the premature departure of Helen, his wife, after an illness that consumed her quickly. Julia, 6 years old, ran after, a butterfly, her brown hair swaying in the wind. Gabriel, just 2, tried to keep up with his still unsteady little legs. Both still asked for their mother, especially on the lonelier nights. "Mr. Aldridge, lunch is served," announced Mrs. Zelda, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for over a decade. "Thank you, Zelda. Could you call the children, please?" Zelda nodded and walked towards the garden. Robert adjusted his tie, sighing. In a few minutes, he would have an important meeting with international investors, interested in his new venture in Canary Wharf, London. Life didn't stop, even when his heart pleaded for a moment of rest. In the luxuriously decorated dining room, Robert watched his children eat while he merely toyed with the food on his plate. The house, despite all the exquisite furniture and valuable works of art, seemed empty. The children's laughter was moments of light in an environment that had lost its warmth when Helen left. "Daddy, are you going out again today?" asked Julia, interrupting his thoughts. "Yes, Princess. I have an important meeting, but I promise to be back in time to read you a bedtime story." Gabriel clapped his little hands on the table, seeking his father's attention, who smiled and ruffled his fair hair, so similar to Helen's. "Don't forget, tomorrow is Julia's ballet recital," Mrs. Zelda reminded him as she served juice to the children. "Of course I won't forget. It's already marked in my diary." After lunch, Robert kissed his children and got into his black Mercedes. On the way to his office in the financial district of the City of London, he thought about how his life had changed. Building his property empire had been quite a challenge for a boy who started as an office boy in Birmingham. Now Aldridge Developments was one of the largest in the country, with projects in several UK capitals. His phone rang. It was his best friend, Charles. "So, Robert, ready for tonight's charity event?" Robert cursed under his breath. He had completely forgotten about the Happy Child Foundation event, where he was to be honored for his donations. "Of course I am," he lied, quickly glancing at the suit he was wearing. He would have to send for another one from the apartment he kept in the city, for emergencies like this. "Great, because we have to get there early. The governor confirmed his presence and the press will be out in full force. Oh, and before I forget, Patricia Vance, that journalist who interviewed you last month, will be hosting the event." Charles continued talking, but Robert was no longer paying attention. Patricia was one of many women who had appeared in his life after he became a widower. Beautiful, intelligent, but without that special connection he had felt with Helen. None of them had it. The charity event at the Londoner Hotel was impeccable, sophisticated. Lighting, live music from a chamber orchestra, and the cream of London society dressed in their finest jewels. Robert, now in a tailor-made navy blue suit, circulated among the guests, shaking hands and receiving congratulations. "Robert Aldridge, the man of the night," exclaimed the governor, approaching with his wife. They exchanged a few words about housing policies until Robert felt a touch on his shoulder. Turning around, he found himself facing green eyes that seemed to hypnotize him. "Excuse me for interrupting, but I don't think we've been formally introduced yet." The melodious voice belonged to a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. Tall, perfectly styled blonde hair, a red dress that contrasted with her porcelain skin. "Barbara Miller." She extended her hand with impeccably painted red nails. "I'm the new marketing director for the foundation." Robert felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a flutter in his stomach, a genuine interest. Robert Aldridge, "It's a pleasure to meet you." Her eyes sparkled in a way that seemed to say, "I know who you are, but there was something more there. Perhaps admiration, perhaps interest." "The pleasure is all mine. Your work with social housing in Peckham is inspiring. I'd love to learn more about it." The conversation flowed with surprising naturalness. Barbara was 32, a marketing graduate from King's College London with a master's from Paris. A former model, she had left the runways to dedicate herself to the non-profit sector. Divorced, no children, intelligent, articulate, and with a sharp sense of humor that made Robert laugh like he hadn't in a long time. When the event ended, it was past midnight, and they were still talking in a more secluded corner of the ballroom. "Sorry to take up so much of your time," she said, discreetly checking her wristwatch. "Time has never been so well spent," Robert replied, surprising himself with the naturalness of his flirtation. They exchanged phone numbers, and the next day Robert sent an arrangement of orchids to her office. On the card, an invitation to dinner. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Dinners at exclusive restaurants, a weekend in the Cotswolds, conversations that stretched late into the night. Barbara brought light and joy into Robert's life. Her clear laughter filled spaces that had been empty for so long. In the 3rd month of their relationship, Robert decided to introduce her to his children. He was nervous, knowing how important this meeting would be. Julia was especially attached to her mother's memory, and Gabriel, though small, could be shy with strangers. "What if they don't like me?" asked Barbara, adjusting the casual dress she had chosen especially for the occasion as they were in the car on the way to the mansion. "Impossible not to like you," Robert assured her, squeezing her hand. The meeting was better than he could have hoped. Barbara brought perfect gifts, a porcelain doll for Julia and a remote control car for Gabriel. But it wasn't just that. She sat on the floor to play with them, listened attentively to the confused stories Julia told about school, and didn't mind when Gabriel spilled juice on her expensive dress. "Sorry about that," Robert said, trying to clean the stain with a napkin. "It's just clothes," she smiled, tickling Gabriel's tummy, who giggled. What matters is this right here. At that moment, seeing his new girlfriend interact so naturally with his children, Robert felt something awaken within him. Hope. The possibility of being happy again, of rebuilding a family. When the children went to sleep, he and Barbara stayed on the veranda, drinking wine and watching the city lights in the distance. "They are wonderful," she said, leaning against Robert's chest. "Julia has so much of you. That determined look. And Gabriel is pure sweetness. They liked you a lot. And I liked them." Robert took a deep breath before asking the question that had been pounding in his head for weeks. "Barbara, would you consider becoming part of our family? For real?" She turned to face him, her green eyes shining under the moonlight. "Are you asking me to marry you, Robert Aldridge?" "I am. It's fast, I know, but when you know what you want." Barbara silenced him with a kiss. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." News of the engagement surprised many. Charles, in particular, expressed concern about the speed of the relationship, but Robert was determined. At 45, he knew what he wanted, and he wanted Barbara by his side, helping him raise his children, sharing his life. The wedding was set. For 3 months later, enough time to organize a discreet but elegant ceremony. As preparations moved forward, Barbara began to spend more time at the mansion, getting to know the children's routine, making small changes to the decor, gradually becoming part of that home. One sunny afternoon, while watching Barbara help Julia with her homework, Robert felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. Finally, his house once again had the warmth of a home. Robert and Barbara's wedding was held in the gardens of the Kensington mansion, in an intimate ceremony with only 100 guests. A modest number by London elite standards. Julia, radiant in her flower girl dress, scattered rose petals along the path. Gabriel, in Mrs. Zelda's arms, clapped at every exclamation from the guests. The bride entered to the sound of violins, stunning in an exclusive Valentino gown. Her blonde hair styled in an elegant chignon adorned with small natural flowers. Robert, seeing her, felt his eyes well up. He hadn't imagined he could feel that emotion again, after Helen. "You look beautiful," he whispered when she reached the altar. "It's all for you. For all of you," Barbara replied, casting an affectionate glance at the children in the front row. The vows were moving. Barbara promised not only to love Robert, but also to care for his children as if they were her own. When the ceremony ended, amidst applause and thrown rice, a new phase began for the Aldridge family. The honeymoon was a cruise through the Greek islands, while the children stayed with Mrs. Zelda and their paternal grandmother, Cecilia. For 2 weeks, the couple enjoyed the Mediterranean sun, romantic dinners and strolls through picturesque villages. Barbara was the perfect companion, interesting, fun, sensual. Robert felt completely in love. "I never imagined I could be this happy again," he confessed as they watched the sunset in Santorini. "This is just the beginning of our story," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his. "We have a whole life ahead of us." Back in the United Kingdom, family routine began to settle. Barbara quickly took on the role of mistress of the house, making some changes she deemed necessary. "How long has the housekeeper been here again?" she asked one evening as they reviewed some bills in Robert's office. "Mrs. Zelda, more than 10 years. She practically helped raise the children." "Why?" Barbara bit her lip as if hesitating to say something. "I don't know. I just think she's a bit old-fashioned in her methods. Yesterday I caught her giving Gabriel chocolate before dinner. You know how that ruins his appetite." Robert shrugged. "She always spoiled the children a little. I think it's her way of showing affection." "I understand. But now that I'm here, we can establish more consistent rules, don't you think? For the children's sake." He agreed, not giving it much importance. After all, Barbara seemed genuinely concerned about the little one's well-being. In the following days, she began to implement new routines, stricter meal times, limited television time, methodical organization of toys. "Structure is important for child development," she explained when Robert commented on the changes. "I read several books on education during university." A month after returning from their honeymoon, Mrs. Zelda resigned. Robert was surprised and tried to convince her to stay, but she was determined. "Don't worry, Mr. Aldridge," the housekeeper said with downcast eyes. "Mrs. Miller is right to want to. Do things her way, it's better this way." "Was there any disagreement between you?" "No, sir, I just think it's time for me to retire. My sister in Manchester isn't well, and I need to take care of her." Robert offered a generous severance package beyond what the law required. Mrs. Zelda thanked him, emotional, and promised to visit the children whenever possible. As she left, she hugged Julia and Gabriel tightly and whispered something in the girl's ear that Robert couldn't hear. Barbara quickly hired a new team, a younger housekeeper named Susan who followed her orders. Precisely, and 2 maids for general services. One of them was Caroline, a 23-year-old girl from rural Yorkshire with kind eyes and a timid manner. "This girl seems inexperienced to me," Barbara commented, watching Caroline clean the living room. "But Susan says she's diligent." "Everyone deserves an opportunity," Robert replied, distracted by documents he needed to sign. In the following weeks, the mansion gained a new dynamic. It was always impeccable, with fresh flowers in vases and sophisticated dishes at meals. Barbara organized dinners for influential friends and potential business partners, always with a charming smile. Robert was proud of how his wife managed everything perfectly. However, little by little, small details began to bother him. Julia, normally talkative, was quieter during meals. When he asked about school, she answered in monosyllables, glancing sideways at Barbara. Gabriel, who had always been a cheerful baby, cried more frequently. Robert attributed this to a developmental phase, the famous terrible twos that Helen had mentioned before she passed. One Sunday morning, Robert was playing with Gabriel in the garden when the boy fell and scratched his knee. The crying was immediate and inconsolable, more intense than the small injury would justify. "Calm down, champ, it was just a scratch," Robert said, picking him up. Barbara appeared quickly, attracted by the noise. "What happened?" "He fell. Nothing serious." She took Gabriel from Robert's arms with a swift movement. "Big boys don't cry over every little thing, Gabriel. Come on, stop that now." The tone was firm, almost harsh. Robert frowned. "He's only 2 years old, love." Barbara immediately softened her expression. "Of course I'm sorry. My father always used to say that. I guess I internalized it. Shall we clean that, boo-boo? Little one? She took Gabriel inside, leaving Robert thoughtful. He had never seen this more severe side of Barbara, but then again, maybe it was just a different parenting style. After all, he himself tended to be too permissive with the children, as Helen always pointed out, laughing. Days turned into weeks and the feeling of discomfort grew. One evening, while working late in his office in the mansion, Robert heard muffled crying coming from Julia's room. Concerned, he went to check. The girl was sitting on the bed, hugging her pillow, silent tears streaming down her face. When she saw her father, she quickly tried to wipe her eyes. "What's wrong, Princess?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Nothing, Daddy. Are you crying for nothing?" She hesitated, looking at the door as if fearing someone was listening. "I miss Mommy," she finally said in a low voice. Robert felt a pang in his chest. Of course the girl would miss Helen. He himself missed her, every day, despite the happiness he had found with Barbara. "I miss her too, darling, but we have to move forward as she would. Have wanted us to. And now we have Barbara, who likes you very much." Julia didn't answer, just squeezed the pillow tighter. "Did something happen? Did you and Barbara have a disagreement?" The girl shook her head negatively, but without looking at her father. "You can tell me anything, Julia. You know that, don't you?" "I know, Daddy." He waited, but she said nothing more. With a sigh, he kissed her forehead and adjusted the covers. "Try to get some sleep. Everything looks better tomorrow." As he left the room, Robert found Barbara in the hallway, wearing a silk nightgown. "Is everything all right?" she asked, looking concerned. "Julia was crying. Says she misses her mother." Barbara made a sympathetic expression. "Poor thing. It must be hard for her. Maybe we could take her to a child psychologist?" "That might be a good idea. I can look for recommendations tomorrow. I know some excellent ones." Robert hugged her, grateful for her understanding and proactivity. Together, they returned to the master bedroom. The next morning, during breakfast, Robert watched as Julia kept her eyes fixed on her plate, avoiding looking at Barbara. Gabriel, in his high chair, refused to eat the porridge Susan was trying to give him. "He's been like this for days," the housekeeper commented. "He hardly eats anything." "It must just be a phase," Barbara said, checking messages on her phone. "Children throw tantrums for attention. Maybe we should take him to the pediatrician," Robert suggested. "I've already booked an appointment for next week," Barbara informed him. "I thought of it yesterday." Again, Robert felt grateful for his wife's efficiency. She really thought of everything. That afternoon, when he returned early from the office for a rare moment of leisure, Robert found the house silent. He went upstairs towards the children's rooms and past Gabriel's room, where a soft voice caught his attention. It was Caroline, the timid maid, singing a lullaby while folding some clothes. Gabriel, in his crib, watched her with attentive eyes, almost mesmerized by the melody. For the first time in days, he seemed peaceful. "Sorry, sir," Caroline said, startled to notice Robert at the door. "I was just putting away the clothes and he seemed restless, so—" "Don't worry. He seems to like your voice." A slight blush colored the young woman's cheeks. "My grandmother used to sing that song to me when I was little." Robert smiled, noticing how comfortable Gabriel seemed with Caroline, unlike how he reacted lately with Barbara, always tense and tearful. "You have a way with children. Do you have siblings?" "Yes, sir. I'm the oldest of 5. I practically raised my siblings while my mother worked." The businessman made a mental note to talk to Susan about giving Caroline more responsibilities with the children. Clearly she had a natural gift. As he left the room, Robert felt an inexplicable chill. Something wasn't right in that house, but he couldn't identify what. He tried to shake the thought. He was being paranoid. After all, he had everything he had ever dreamed of: a successful career, adorable children, and a stunning wife who managed his home perfectly. So why that persistent feeling that something was about to collapse? The first parent-teacher meeting at Julia's school after the wedding left Robert intrigued. Miss Louise, who always praised the girl's performance and behavior, seemed strangely hesitant. "Julia has always been an exemplary student, Mr. Aldridge, but in recent weeks I've noticed some changes," she said, adjusting her colorful framed glasses. "What kind of changes?" She's more withdrawn. She doesn't participate in group activities as before and has been isolating herself during breaks. Yesterday, when I asked her to draw a picture of her family, she stared at the blank paper for almost the entire class. Robert frowned, concerned. It must be the adjustment. We lost her mother a little over a year ago, and I recently remarried. The teacher nodded, understanding. Of course, these transitions are difficult, but there's something else that worries me. She hesitated as if choosing her words. Julia has shown anxious behavior. The other day, when she dropped her pencil case, she started apologizing compulsively, almost in a panic, and I noticed some bruises on her arm. Bruises? Yes. When I asked, she said she fell off the swing. It could be true, children get hurt playing, but... Robert felt his heart race. Are you suggesting someone deliberately hurt my daughter? The teacher recoiled a little at the intensity of his reaction. I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Aldridge. Just sharing my observations, as I would with any parent. Perhaps it would be interesting to observe her more closely at home, to see if there are other signs of emotional stress. On the way back to the mansion, with Julia asleep in the back seat of the car, Robert couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. Bruises? Julia, who had always been so confident and talkative, was now withdrawn and anxious. Upon arriving home, they found Barbara in the living room, elegantly dressed for the charity dinner they would have that night. How was the meeting, Dora? She asked, kissing her husband and then stroking Julia's hair, who subtly flinched away. Interesting, Robert replied, observing the interaction between the two. The teacher said Julia has been quieter lately. That's normal. Children go through phases. Barbara smiled at her stepdaughter. Don't they, darling? Now go get ready. Caroline has prepared a bath for you. Julia went upstairs without saying a word, her shoulders slightly slumped. During the charity dinner, at one of London's most exclusive restaurants, Robert couldn't concentrate on the conversations around him. While Barbara charmed everyone with her charisma and intelligence, he kept thinking about his children, the changes he had noticed, the teacher's observations. Are you all right? Barbara whispered at one point, placing her hand over his. You seem distant. I'm just tired. Tough week at work. She smiled, understanding. We can leave early if you want. No. I know how important this event is to you. Indeed, as the Foundation's marketing director, Barbara had organized that dinner to raise funds for a new social project. She was radiant in her sapphire blue dress, working the room like a true professional, ensuring every donor felt special. On the way home, as the driver drove through the illuminated city, Robert decided to address the issue that bothered him. Barbara, have you noticed anything different about Julia lately? She seemed to think for a moment. She has been a little more introspective, yes, but I thought it was just a phase. Why? The teacher mentioned she's isolating herself at school, and she spoke about some bruises on her arm. Barbara frowned, looking genuinely concerned. Bruises? I didn't notice anything, but you know how children are, always getting hurt. Just last week she fell. In the garden while running. Did you see that happen? No, she told me afterwards. Her clothes were all dirty with mud. Barbara adjusted in her seat, turning to face him. You seem worried. Do you think there's something more? Robert sighed. I don't know. It's just that the children are different. Julia barely speaks. Gabriel cries over everything. It's an adjustment for all of us, my love. They lost their mother. Now they have a new female figure in the house. It takes time. But we're progressing, don't you think? He wanted to believe that. He really did. The next morning, Saturday, Robert decided to spend more time with the children. He cancelled a golf game with partners and proposed a picnic in Hyde Park. Barbara declined the invitation, citing an emergency meeting at the Foundation. Have fun, she said, kissing each one before leaving, perfumed and elegant even on a Saturday morning. In the park, sitting on a checkered blanket in the shade of a leafy tree, Robert watched as Julia seemed to relax little by little, away from home. She even smiled when a small dog came to sniff. Her sandwich. Do you like dogs? Robert asked, trying to start a conversation. Yes. Can we have one? The question caught him by surprise. Julia had never asked for a pet before. Well, we'd have to talk to Barbara about that. But why do you want a dog now? Julia shrugged, becoming quiet again. I don't know, it would be nice to have someone to play with. Don't you play with Barbara? The girl began to pull off tiny blades of grass, avoiding her father's gaze. Not much. She's always busy. And when she's not busy? Julia didn't answer. Gabriel, who was playing with a toy car, suddenly crawled onto his sister's lap and snuggled there, as if seeking protection. Julia, if there's anything you want to tell me, you can. About anything or anyone. The girl's eyes briefly met her father's, and for an instant Robert saw something there. Fear. But she quickly looked away again. It's okay, Daddy. On Sunday night, after putting the children to bed, Robert went to his office to review some contracts. The mansion was silent. Barbara had gone out to dinner. With friends. Suddenly he heard a noise coming from the hallway. Opening the door, he found Caroline holding a tray with a glass of milk. Sorry to bother you, sir, she said, looking nervous. Julia asked for warm milk. She said she couldn't sleep. I didn't know she had that habit. It started recently. She asks almost every night. Something in the maid's tone caught Robert's attention. Caroline, have you noticed anything different with the children? She hesitated, her eyes downcast. It's not my place to comment, sir. Please, if you know anything that could help my children, I need you to tell me. Caroline bit her lip, clearly conflicted. Little Gabriel hardly eats when Mrs. Miller is around, and Julia, she stopped as if she had gone too far. Continue. She has nightmares, sir. Several times I've heard her cry at night. One time, when I went to see what was happening, she was curled up under the covers, trembling. Robert's stomach tightened. And what did you do? I sat beside her until she fell asleep again. I didn't tell anyone because... She hesitated. Again. Because? Mrs. Miller said we shouldn't spoil the children, that they need to learn to deal with their emotions alone. Robert frowned. That didn't sound like the kind of pedagogical guidance Barbara advocated in public, always talking about emotional support and active listening when it came to early childhood education. How long has this been going on? The nightmares started about 3 weeks ago, but the children have been different for longer. Ever since Mrs. Zelda left, Robert finished. Caroline nodded shyly. Thank you for your honesty, Caroline. You can take the milk to Julia now, and this stays between us, okay? Yes, sir. When Barbara returned around 11 at night, she found Robert still in the office, now with a glass of whiskey in his hand. Productive night? She asked, placing her purse on an armchair. More or less. How was dinner? Wonderful. Fernanda just got back from Paris and brought news about that project I told you about. As Barbara spoke animatedly about the Foundation's plans, Robert watched her with new eyes. Was she the same charming and sophisticated woman he had fallen in love with? Or was there something more behind that perfect facade? Love? Are you listening to me? Barbara's voice brought him back to the present. Sorry, I'm exhausted. I think I'm going to bed. She approached, massaging his tense shoulders. You work too much. You need to relax a little. Her hands were skillful, untying the knots of tension. For a moment, Robert almost let himself be carried away by the sensation, almost forgot his worries. Almost. That night, lying next to Barbara, who slept peacefully, Robert couldn't close his eyes. The teacher's words echoed in his mind, along with Caroline's observations and the changes he himself had noticed in his children. Something was wrong in his house, and he needed to find out what. The next morning, during breakfast, Robert carefully observed the interaction between Barbara and the children. Superficially, everything seemed normal. She asked Julia about her homework, adjusted Gabriel's bib, reminded Robert about an appointment that afternoon, but there were small, unsettling details. The way Julia flinched slightly when Barbara got too close, the look his wife gave when Gabriel dropped his spoon on the floor. They were fractions of a second, almost imperceptible expressions, but now that he was paying attention, Robert could notice them. I have a business trip next week, he announced, observing everyone's reaction. 3 days in Edinburgh for that meeting with the minister. Oh, I had forgotten, Barbara said, drinking her coffee. We'll miss you, won't we, children? Julia nodded mechanically. Gabriel remained focused on his food. "Maybe I should cancel," Robert suggested, testing the waters. "I don't like leaving you alone." "Don't be silly." Barbara smiled, placing her hand over his. "We can manage, can't we? Besides, it's an important meeting for the company." There was something in her tone, relief, anticipation, that intensified Robert's suspicions. That afternoon, while Barbara took the children to a swimming lesson, he went to Julia's room. He didn't like invading his daughter's privacy, but he needed answers. He opened the closet, the drawers, looking for anything out of the ordinary. That's when he noticed the diary, hidden inside a box of old toys. He hesitated, holding the small lilac-covered notebook in his hands. Reading Julia's diary felt like an unforgivable violation. But what if something truly serious was happening? Wouldn't it be worse to ignore it? With a heavy heart, he opened the diary. Most of the pages were blank, but there were some recent notes in a child's uneven handwriting. They weren't complete texts, just loose phrases. "Had a nightmare again. Wish Mummy was here. She said if I tell Daddy it will be worse." The last sentence made Robert's blood run cold. She could only be Barbara. And tell what? He closed the diary and put it exactly where he had found it, his mind racing. He had no concrete proof of anything, only suspicions and indications. Confronting Barbara directly could be disastrous if he was wrong, and even more disastrous if he was right. He needed more information. He needed to see with his own eyes what happened when he wasn't present. It was then that an idea began to form in his mind. It was risky, perhaps even absurd, but it could work. He knew his house better than anyone. He knew the routines, the schedules, and there was a real need. The mansion's old pipes indeed needed to be checked, a job he had been postponing for months. That night, after everyone was asleep, Robert made a call. "Lawrence, it's Robert Aldridge. I need a special favor, and I can't explain it over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow at the office?" Lawrence, his personal head of security for over a decade, agreed without asking questions. He was known for his discretion and loyalty. The next morning, in a private room at Aldridge Development's office, Robert explained his unusual plan. "I need to disappear for a few days, but actually stay in my own house without being recognized." The middle-aged security guard, with his robust physique and perpetually serious expression, listened attentively, showing no surprise. "May I ask why, sir?" "I suspect something is happening in my house, something I can't see when I'm present. I need to find out the truth." Lawrence nodded, without judgment. "What exactly do you need, sir?" "Documents for a false identity, a basic background that holds up if someone checks, and help to get a convincing disguise." "I can take care of that. When do you plan to put this plan into action?" "Next week. I'll supposedly be in Edinburgh for 3 days." "Understand. And the company?" "I'll delegate everything to Charles temporarily. He can contact me in emergencies, but he'll need to keep absolute secrecy." As they finalized the details, Robert felt a mixture of determination and apprehension. If his suspicions were correct, he was about to discover a dark side to the woman he had chosen to help him raise his children. If he was wrong, well, he would have to live with the guilt of having unjustly mistrusted his wife. But when he thought of Julia's frightened eyes and Gabriel's constant crying, he knew he had no choice. Something was happening in his house, and he needed to find out what, even if it meant becoming someone else. That Monday, Robert said goodbye to his family with his suitcase packed for the supposed trip to Edinburgh. Barbara kissed him long at the mansion door. The children waved shyly from the entrance hall. "I'll call when I arrive," he promised, getting into the car where the driver was waiting. But instead of heading to the airport, the vehicle stopped a few blocks ahead, on a quiet street in Richmond. There, Lawrence waited for him in a discreet, silver hatchback. Robert quickly transferred to the other car, taking only a small backpack. "Everything is ready, sir," the security guard informed him, handing him an envelope. Inside, there was an ID card with the name Anthony Smith, business cards for a plumbing company called Hydraulic Solutions, and a prepaid cell phone. "The van is parked 2 blocks from here, with the uniform and tools. I got a used boiler suit, work boots, and everything else a plumber would need. There's also a fake beard and mustache, plus a worn-out cap. Excellent work, Lawrence. The company's history has been created online, with a basic website and some fake reviews. If anyone checks, it will look like a small plumbing service company founded 5 years ago in Reading. The cell phone number is registered on the site. Robert nodded, impressed by the man's efficiency. And what about contact with the house? As you requested, I spoke with Susan this morning, introducing myself as the secretary for Hydraulic Solutions. I explained that you had scheduled a complete pipe inspection before traveling, and that the technician would arrive today around 10. Robert checked his watch. He had less than an hour to transform into the plumber, Anthony. The white van with the Hydraulic Solutions logo was exactly where Lawrence had indicated. In the passenger seat, Robert found a bag with the disguise items. He drove to a nearby petrol station and entered the restroom, locking the door behind him. 20 minutes later, a different man looked back at him in the mirror. The grease-stained blue boiler suit, the worn boots, the faded cap with the company logo, the fake brown beard and thick mustache completely transformed his appearance. He also put on a pair of thick-rimmed, non-prescription glasses, which helped to conceal his features. "Welcome to the world, Anthony Smith," he murmured to his reflection, practicing a thicker accent, different from his normally impeccable diction. At exactly 10 o'clock, the white van with the Hydraulic Solutions logo parked in front of the Aldridge mansion. Robert, now Anthony, rang the intercom with a knot in his stomach. "Good morning, I'm Anthony from Hydraulic Solutions. I'm here to do the pipe inspection that Mr. Aldridge scheduled." After a few seconds, the electronic gate opened. Robert drove slowly up the cobblestone driveway to the entrance of the house he himself had designed years ago. It was surreal to be a stranger on his own property. Susan greeted him at the back door with her usual serious expression. "Good morning. Mr. Aldridge mentioned someone would be coming, but he left yesterday for a business trip." "Yes, ma'am. His secretary confirmed the service last week. It's a big job, will take a few days. The pipes in this house are old, needs a complete overhaul." "I understand. Mrs. Miller is home. I'll let her know." Robert waited in the service corridor, his heart pounding. Minutes later, Barbara appeared, wearing a designer yoga set and her hair tied in an elegant ponytail. "Good morning," she said, analyzing him from head to toe with those sharp green eyes. "I wasn't aware my husband had scheduled this service." "Good morning, ma'am. It was scheduled last week. Sorry for the inconvenience. If you prefer, I can come back another day." Barbara thought for a moment, then shrugged. "No, it's fine. The house really does need this maintenance." "Where will you start?" "In the basement, if you don't mind, ma'am. That's where the main pipes are." "Of course, Susan will show you the way. Just try not to make too much noise. The children are home today. The little one isn't feeling well." Robert felt a pang of concern. "Gabriel is sick." Barbara frowned slightly, perhaps finding it odd that the plumber knew her son's name. "Yes, he has a bit of a fever. How do you know his name?" Robert realized his slip-up and improvised quickly. "Oh, the lady at the office mentioned it. Said the service was at Mr. Aldridge's house, who has 2 small children, Julia and Gabriel. Sorry for the indiscretion." The explanation seemed to satisfy her. "I see. Well, as I said, try to be discreet. And if you need anything, speak to Susan or Caroline." With that, she withdrew, leaving behind a cloud of expensive perfume. Susan led Robert to the basement, a spacious and well-organized area where the laundry room, climate-controlled wine cellar, and access to the house's main pipes were located. "You can work here, Mr. Anthony. Mr. Aldridge keeps some tools in that cupboard if you need any," the housekeeper indicated. "I'll bring you some coffee shortly." "Thank you very much, Mrs. Susan." Alone, Robert examined the place, recalling the house's blueprint. Indeed, he needed to do some work on the pipes to maintain the facade, but his true objective was to observe the house's dynamics when he wasn't present. The basement had a staircase that led directly to the kitchen, and from there it was possible to access almost all social areas without being noticed. Perfect for what he intended. He spent the morning making convincing noises with tools, occasionally replacing some connections that actually needed to be changed. During lunch, he discreetly went up to the kitchen where Caroline was preparing soup. "Excuse me," he said, deliberately using a simpler pronunciation. "Mrs. Susan said I could have lunch here." Caroline smiled gently. "Of course, Mr. Anthony. You can sit there." She pointed to a small table in the corner. "I'm finishing preparing the family's lunch, but I'll make a plate for you too." "Thank you very much, young lady. You are very kind." While eating, Robert watched Caroline work. There was a quiet efficiency in her movements, a natural kindness that was reflected in the care with which she prepared the soup for Gabriel. "The boy is sick, isn't he?" he asked casually. "Yes, he has a bad cold. Dr. Maurice came to see him yesterday and prescribed some medicine." "Poor little thing. And the girl, how is she?" "Julia is at school. She'll be back after lunch." The conversation was interrupted when Barbara entered the kitchen, now dressed in an elegant silk pants and blouse set. "Caroline, is lunch ready? I have a video conference in 20 minutes. "Yes, ma'am, I'll serve it right away. And Gabriel's soup? Also ready." "Great. You can take it to his room. I'll have lunch in the office." Only then did Barbara seem to notice Robert at the table. "Ah, the plumber. How's the work going?" "Well, ma'am, I'm replacing some old connections. Tomorrow I'll need to check the bathrooms on the second floor if it's not too much trouble." "All right, but as I said, be discreet." She left, leaving a different atmosphere in the kitchen. Robert noticed how Caroline's shoulders, previously relaxed, were now tense. "Can I help carry the tray?" he offered, standing up. "It looks heavy." Caroline hesitated. "I don't know if Mrs. Miller would approve. She won't even know." "I'm used to helping. I have 3 small nephews." The young woman eventually accepted the help. Together, they went up the service staircase to the second floor. In the hallway, Robert could hear Barbara's voice coming from the office, talking animatedly on the phone about a charity cocktail party. Gabriel's room was in semi-darkness, with the curtains partially closed. The boy was lying in his bed, his eyes red from fever or crying. Robert couldn't tell. His heart tightened at seeing his son so fragile. "Hi, little one," Caroline said in a sweet voice. "I brought you some tasty soup." Gabriel flinched a little at seeing the bearded stranger next to the maid. "This is Mr. Anthony, Gabriel. He came to fix the pipes in the house," Caroline explained, sitting on the edge of the bed. "And he's going to help us with the soup. Isn't that nice?" The boy didn't answer, just watched with wide eyes as Robert placed the tray on the nightstand. "Hi, champ," Robert said, trying to disguise the emotion in his voice. "I hope you get better soon." He watched as Caroline patiently fed Gabriel, spoonful by spoonful, talking to him in a low voice, telling him little stories to distract him. The affection was evident, and the boy seemed to trust her completely. "You have a way with children," Robert commented as they left the room. "I like them," she simply replied. "They are good children." There was something in her tone that made him ask, "But?" Caroline looked around, making sure they were alone in the hallway. "It's nothing. You can trust me." She sighed. "It's just that they deserve more affection, more attention. Mrs. Miller is very busy and sometimes a bit strict." "Strict how?" Before Caroline could answer, Barbara's voice echoed from the end of the hallway. "Caroline, I need you in my office now." "I have to go," the maid whispered, moving away quickly. Robert returned to the basement, his mind buzzing. What did strict mean in Caroline's vocabulary? What happened in that house when he was in the office or traveling? During the afternoon he worked on the pipes, occasionally going up to check different points of the house. Around 3 he heard the front door open and Julia's voice announcing her arrival from school. Discreetly, he positioned himself near the living room where he could listen without being seen. "How was school today?" Barbara asked in a tone that sounded perfectly maternal. "Normal," Julia replied, monosyllabic as she had been lately. "Normal how?" "Learn to express yourself properly, Julia. We didn't raise you to be an uneducated girl." The tone had subtly changed. It still sounded sweet, but there was a rigidity behind it, a veiled threat that made Robert shiver. "Sorry," Julia said quickly. "The class was good. Ms. Louise praised my drawing." "Better so. Now go change your clothes. That skirt is all wrinkled. Then come down for a snack and do your homework. I have visitors coming at 5 and I want you presentable." "Yes, ma'am." "Ma'am?" Since when did Julia address Barbara as ma'am? Robert remained motionless in his hiding spot as he heard his daughter's light footsteps going up the stairs. He wanted to follow her, hug her, tell her he was there, but he knew he couldn't reveal his identity yet. He needed more information, more proof. The following hours were agonizing. He continued his facade work in the basement, occasionally circulating through the house to check other pipes. Around 5, as announced, Barbara's visitors arrived, 3 elegant women Robert recognized from his wife's social circle. He positioned himself strategically near the living room, pretending to examine a water valve while listening to the conversation. Barbara was in her element, charming and sophisticated, serving tea in English porcelain and talking about the Foundation's new project. At one point she called for Julia, who timidly came down the stairs wearing a dress Robert had never seen before. "This is my stepdaughter, Julia," Barbara introduced with a proud smile. "Julia, greet the ladies properly." The girl made a small curtsy, almost like a bow, and greeted each of the visitors with a formality strange for a 6-year-old child. "How charmingly well behaved," exclaimed one of the women. "Barbara, you've worked miracles. When Richard married that widow who had 2 teenage children, it was a disaster. He never managed to set boundaries. It's a matter of firmness and consistency," Barbara replied, stroking Julia's hair in a way that seemed affectionate, but which made the girl visibly stiffen. "Children need structure. Robert was too permissive before." Julia kept her eyes down, her little hands clasped in front of her body, in a posture that seemed rehearsed. "You can go now, darling," Barbara said after a few minutes of display. "Finish your homework." When the girl left, the women continued praising Barbara's maternal skills, who accepted the compliments with false modesty. Robert felt nauseous. That was not the joyful and spontaneous daughter he knew. Julia seemed like a little doll programmed to please. Late in the afternoon, when the visitors had already left, Robert was in the hall near the stairs when he heard the sound of breaking glass, followed by a muffled exclamation from Julia. "What was that?" Barbara's voice, previously honeyed with the visitors, now sounded sharp. Robert approached discreetly, stopping near the entrance to the living room. Julia was standing next to a small table where a glass of juice had fallen, spilling the orange liquid on the light-colored rug. "Sorry," the girl murmured, already with tears in her eyes. "It was an accident." Barbara looked around, making sure they were alone, unaware of Robert's presence partially hidden by the hallway. Then, with a swift movement, she grabbed Julia's arm tightly. "What did I say about being clumsy?" she hissed, with a contained rage that transformed her beautiful face into a frightening mask. "Sorry, I didn't." "Sorry doesn't clean the rug, does it? Nor does it pay for the crystal glass. Do you know how much this costs?" Julia trembled, tears now streaming freely down her face. "Go. Get a cloth to clean that mess, and then straight to your room. No dinner tonight." "But I'm hungry." Barbara's hand tightened even more on the girl's arm. "Are you contradicting me? Do you want me to tell your father how rebellious you are when he's not around? How you break things on purpose?" "No, ma'am, please, then obey, now." She released Julia's arm with a shove, making the girl almost stumble. Robert had to use all his willpower not to intervene. His paternal instinct screamed to protect his daughter, but he knew that revealing his identity now could compromise the entire plan. Julia ran to the kitchen, returning seconds later with a cloth. She knelt and began to clean the spilled juice, her little hands trembling, sobbing softly. Barbara stood, watching with crossed arms and an expression of contempt. "Learn to be more careful, Julia. Next time the punishment will be worse, understood?" "Yes, ma'am," the girl replied between sobs. "I can't hear you." "Yes, ma'am," Julia repeated, louder, the fear evident in her voice. "Better so. Now finish that and go to your room." When Barbara left the room, Robert quickly retreated, hiding in a nearby broom closet. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure it could be heard. Anger and horror mingled in his chest. How had he not noticed before? How had he been so blind? This was not a case of strict discipline or difficult adaptation. It was pure and simple psychological abuse, perpetrated by a woman he had brought into his home, close to his children. And worst of all, what else happened when he wasn't looking? That night, Robert couldn't sleep in the motel where he was staying as Anthony Smith. The scene he had witnessed, Barbara humiliating Julia over a simple broken glass, replayed in his mind. And there was more he still didn't know. At 6 in the morning, he was back at the mansion to continue his disguise. The house was still asleep when he was led to the basement by a security guard. There he formulated his plan. He needed concrete proof that Barbara couldn't deny. He remembered the voice recorder he used to jot down business ideas, which should be in his desk drawer. Around 7, he discreetly went upstairs with a toolbox. In the hallway, he found Caroline arranging flowers. "Good morning, Mr. Anthony," she greeted him. "Good morning. I need to check the pipes in Mr. Aldridge's office. The office is locked. Only Mrs. Miller has the key when the boss travels. Since when was his office locked in his absence?" "I see. I'll start with the bathrooms then. Is the boy better?" His fever went down during the night. At that moment, they heard Barbara's voice calling, "Caroline, bring my coffee to my room now." Robert watched as the maid's body tensed. Clearly, his wife wasn't just cruel to the children. Following his improvised plan, he went to the guest bathroom and closed the door, waiting for the right moment to access his office. An hour later, he heard Barbara leave. He waited a few more minutes and found Caroline cleaning the stairs. "Has Mrs. Miller left?" "Yes, for the foundation. She won't be back until the afternoon. There's an event tonight." "And the children?" "Julia is at school. Gabriel stayed home because of his cold, with Susan." It was the perfect opportunity. Robert just needed an excuse to access his office. That leak in the upstairs hallway might be coming from the office wall if I could just take a look. Caroline went to get Susan, who appeared with the keys. "I can open it, but I need to be present. Orders from Mrs. Miller." In the office, Robert pretended to examine the wall and then approached the desk. "Can I move this bookshelf?" "I think the pipe runs behind it." With a quick movement, he opened the drawer and took the voice recorder, hiding it in his boiler suit. "I need a tool. I left in the basement," he said, leaving. At lunch, he offered to help Caroline carry the tray for Gabriel. In the room, they found the boy awake, playing with a toy car. Robert approached, crouching down. "That car is very cool. Can I see?" Gabriel hesitated but handed over the red toy. "You know, when I was little like you, I also liked toy cars," Robert said. "But mine was yellow." A small smile appeared on Gabriel's face. "Yellow is pretty," he said, almost whispering. While Caroline fed the boy, Robert discreetly placed the voice recorder under the bed. In the afternoon, he circulated around the house, watching and listening. He placed a second recorder in the flower vase in the dining room. When Julia returned from school, Robert watched her from the kitchen. Caroline greeted her with affection. "Want a snack? I made those little biscuits you like." The girl's face lit up. "Did Barbara let you?" Caroline looked around before answering. "She's not here. And what the eyes don't see, the heart doesn't grieve over." The girl smiled shyly. Only then did she notice Robert. "Hi," she said. "Hi, little lady. I'm Anthony. I'm fixing the pipes. Will you be here long?" "A few days, probably." There was a distrust in her eyes that broke Robert's heart. His daughter, once so open, now saw threats everywhere. When Barbara returned that night, the whole house changed. From his vantage point, Robert saw his wife call Julia to her room. When the girl came down, her eyes were red. Later, while Barbara was getting ready to go out, Robert retrieved the voice recorder from Gabriel's room. Back in the basement, he connected headphones and pressed the play button. Soon he heard Barbara's sharp voice. "Still in bed, Gabriel? Don't you think you've had enough of this fuss?" There was no response from the boy. "Look at me when I talk to you. I'm tired of this childishness." A muffled sob was the only answer. Pathetic. Where is that incompetent Caroline? And what's this mess? Who left all these toys scattered? Sounds of objects being dragged. "I don't know what your father sees in you. A crybaby who's good for nothing." More sobs, louder. "Stop crying now." The sound of something being hit. The crying stopped abruptly. "Better so. Remember our agreement. You behave and I won't tell your father what happened to his watch. He'd be so disappointed." Robert turned off the recorder, trembling with rage. What agreement? Barbara was clearly manipulating his 2-year-old son. Later, he also retrieved the second recorder. Back at the motel, he planned his next steps. He had evidence, but he needed more. His phone vibrated with a message from Lawrence. "I've concluded the investigation into Mrs. Miller's past. There is urgent information. Can we meet tomorrow?" Robert replied immediately, "Yes, same place, 7 a.m. What else was Guy there to discover about the woman who had entered his life like a dream and was revealing herself to be a nightmare? He fell into a restless sleep, dreaming that he was running through endless corridors, hearing his children call for him without being able to reach them. At the cafe near the motel, Robert found Lawrence with a closed folder on the table. "What did you find out?" he asked directly. Lawrence opened the folder. At first, everything checked out. Marketing degree, masters from Paris, modeling career. But I found inconsistencies. There are no records of Barbara Miller at King's College London, only a Barbara Fields with a corresponding description. Did she change her surname? After her divorce from her first husband, Gustav Miller. The marriage lasted less than 2 years. Lawrence showed a photo of Barbara next to an elegant man, Richard Menzies' second husband, a lawyer from Birmingham, widower with 2 teenage children. The marriage ended after 8 months. Officially, irreconcilable differences. But the real reason was the treatment given to his stepchildren. What treatment? Humiliation, disproportionate punishments, manipulation. The daughter developed severe anxiety. The son started self-harming. Did he find out? When he realized, he proposed a generous divorce settlement in exchange for silence. She accepted, received a good sum, and moved to London. There's more. Before Menzies, she was in a relationship with a businessman from Brighton, a widower with a daughter. The nanny caught her locking the girl in a dark closet. She was fired after Barbara accused her of envy. Weeks later, he himself witnessed something that ended the relationship. So this is her pattern. She seeks out rich, widowed men with young children. Exactly. Always charming in public, always. Cruel in the father's absence. A relevant detail, Barbara was raised by her stepmother. In a problematic relationship, she replicates the pattern. Robert clenched his fists. "I'm ending this today." Back at the mansion, he learned from Caroline that Barbara was planning a lunch for friends at 2 in the afternoon. It was the perfect opportunity. Using the maid's phone, he called Lawrence, asking him to come discreetly to the mansion with the evidence. At 1 o'clock, the kitchen was bustling with activity. Barbara, in a light blue dress, supervised the preparations. Robert strategically placed his voice recorder under the dining room table. When the guests arrived, Susan brought Julia, impeccable in a green dress, who made a perfect curtsy. Gabriel was also presented, looking like a small statue in Barbara's arms. The children were dismissed after the display, and the conversation changed. "You're so lucky," one of the friends commented. "Rich husband, stunning house, well-behaved stepchildren." "It's not luck, it's hard work," Barbara replied. Robert didn't know how to raise children. Julia was a spoiled brat and Gabriel an unbearable crybaby. How did you manage to tame them? Discipline, firmness, and without Daddy around to interfere. She was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. Julia had dropped a baccarat glass. "Sorry," she whispered. "It was an accident." Barbara's face transformed. "What are you doing here?" "Didn't I tell you to go upstairs?" she hissed. I just wanted water. You broke a baccarat glass. Do you know how much that costs?" The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. "They're just children. Accidents happen," one of them tried. "They're not accidents when they repeat themselves," Barbara retorted, raising her hand to Julia. Before the slap could reach the girl, Caroline appeared, interposing herself and taking the blow to her own face. A stunned silence filled the room. "How dare you!" Barbara screamed. "You're just a maid. You're fired." That's when Robert emerged from his hiding place. He walked to the center of the room, still disguised as the plumber. "Your house?" he repeated in a dangerously calm voice. "Who do you think you are? Get back to work or leave with her." Robert slowly removed his disguise, the cap, the fake beard, the mustache, the glasses. Barbara's face transformed into pure horror. "Robert!" "Surprise. I came back early. It's not what you're thinking. I can explain." "Explain what? How you humiliate our children? How you manipulate them? How you turn our home into an environment of terror. I was just disciplining them. Stop lying, I saw everything. I've been here the whole time. Robert picked up the hidden voice recorder. And recording. He played Barbara's confessions to her friends. The silence in the room was sepulchral. I also have recordings from Gabriel's room with you calling him. Pathetic. The doorbell rang. It was Lawrence with the folder of evidence. What is this? Your true history. Barbara Fields, not Miller, ex-wife of Gustav Miller and Richard Menzies, former partner of Edward Sinclair. All relationships ended for the same reason, your abuse against children. You seek out men like me, rich, widowed, with young children. Why? Revenge against your own stepmother. Barbara's face contorted. You don't know what it's like to grow up hated, humiliated. My father never saw it. Men never see. So you choose innocent children as targets. This is absurd. I don't have to listen. This is no longer your home, and you will never see my children again. Cornered, Barbara attacked. I'm your wife. I have rights. I'll ruin you. I'll tell the press how you spied on me. As for your rights, reread the prenuptial agreement. There's a clause about abusive behavior towards dependents. She paled. You can't prove anything. I have recordings, testimonies, your confession in front of witnesses. So what do you want? I want you out of our lives now. Lawrence will escort you to pick up some belongings and then to the gate. And if I refuse? I will present this evidence to the police. Barbara looked away, defeated. Lawrence, please. The guests took the opportunity to escape, embarrassed. When Barbara went upstairs, Robert turned to Caroline, who was protecting Julia. Thank you for protecting my daughter. I just did what any real person would do. Robert opened his arms. Julia hesitated, then ran to him. Daddy, were you here the whole time? Yes, Princess. Sorry I didn't realize it sooner. Is she really leaving? Forever. Together they went to find Gabriel. The boy's eyes widened as he recognized his father. Daddy! Yes. Champ. Gabriel launched himself into his arms with a sob of relief. Julia joined the hug. Later, Lawrence informed him that Barbara had left. She didn't cause any trouble. She seemed almost relieved. The house felt different, lighter. In the living room, while the children played, Robert asked Caroline, "What happens now?" Now we rebuild, day by day, with patience, love, and honesty. They are strong children. They will get through this. Thanks in large part to you. You were the only light in this house. The setting sun cast golden rays through the mansion. Robert now understood that his true fortune was not in material possessions, but in those two small lives that depended on him. He made a silent promise to Helen, wherever she was. He would protect their children with all his strength, and never again would he allow anyone to hurt them. The Aldridge home, once a place of fear, was once again what it should always have been, a home. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Robert and his children's story, has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking the link on the left. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of family life. What would you do in Robert's place? Would you have noticed the signs earlier? Share your opinions in the comments below. We look forward to seeing you in our next story. See you soon.